Good evening.
Hello.
Nothing, nothing.
I was talking with mute on. I'm just pulling up the agenda.
Yeah, you're in charge tonight, Jen.
Yes, it's amazing. Secretary, order of succession here, right? Let's see. Oh, that's not the one I want. Maybe it is. Is the agenda the same as the one for June? It's like exactly the same, right?
Yeah, I don't think I changed anything.
Okay, that's the one I'm finding.
I had asked Chris at one point whether there was anything to add, and he suggested adding elections, which we do need to do, but we do have a new member that was appointed. But she will not start until after August 1st. So I figured we wait on elections until she was seated and ready to go.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah, then we'll have everybody at the table too. I think that's a good idea.
All right, I'm turning on the meeting record.
And we've got,
So we're just waiting on Alicia to get our quorum.
okay. Peek around my.
Brian, do you know whether Josh is still planning to participate, or did he just resign outright?
No, he resigned.
Okay.
Okay, that's the right one.
Yeah, we discussed the fact that the town ordinance only prohibits you from holding multiple positions if you're being paid for one of them. But he said he didn't feel he had the time to commit to both boards, so.
Maybe I'll talk to him about possibly being a rotating member from the planning board to this commission, see if he's interested in that.
You're ex officio at some point. We'll miss you if you go though, Joe.
I wouldn't go completely. I actually find this very interesting, but if Josh wanted to take turns rotating, that I think would work out well too.
Great, so it looks like we've got everybody.
If Ken is with us and not away from his computer, we should have a quorum and be good to go. Are you there, Ken? All right, so I think we.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, he's here.
Great, okay, so I'm gonna call the Affordable Housing Collaborative meeting for Thursday, July 22nd to order at 7:02. And we can just do a roll call. Jen Kruger, present. Anybody else can go.
Okay.
Callie Babbitt Spears, present.
Alicia Johnson, present.
Kenny Burke, present.
Joe Murphy, representative from the planning board, present.
And Brian Wagner from the planning department.
Great, thanks everybody for making the quorum tonight. So the first order of business is just to approve or discuss our draft minutes from May 27th. Did anybody have any feedback or corrections on those?
I'll make a motion first.
Motion to approve, Kenny?
Yes.
Okay, we have a second. Somebody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Like
Aye.
passed unanimously. Does not appear we have any members of the public, Brian, unless you've got someone waiting in the wings.
There was one person on the attendee list, Mariana Zotos. If you want, Mariana, if you have questions or comments or anything you would like to raise before the board, you can do that now and raise your hand. If you're simply here to observe or listen in on one of the agenda items. Okay, so she's got her hand up, Jen. I'm going to go ahead and bring her in.
Great.
Okay, Mariana, you are in.
Oh, sorry, that was a mistake. I was just trying, I thought I could put in the chat. I'm just here to learn and observe and try to get involved. So sorry.
Okay, you're welcome to sit on the sidelines and listen. That's perfectly fine.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for
Okay.
joining. Okay, and then under correspondence, we had the resignation of Josh because he had gone to the planning board and I guess he had the option to do both, but decided planning would probably take up a fair amount of his time. So we're sad to see him go, but glad he's on the planning board. So I guess we'll jump right in. I think we're trying to do this in an hour today. So our first order of business on old business is looking at the draft Affordable Housing Fund application and the draft scoring rubric. Brian, do you want to lead us through that? Maybe any changes that have been made since we last met?
To be honest with you, I would be hard pressed at this point to identify the specific changes that were made.
Okay.
I did go through based on the comments from the last meeting and try and update and expand things. Again, if people think that there are pieces of information that we're not requesting that we should be requesting, or something that we're asking for that we don't need, more than willing to listen to comments. I mean, this is our creation, so it can be whatever we want it to be.
Did anyone have comments on the application piece to start? Sorry, I'm clicking from the documents to the people. So Kenny, is your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't do the virtual hand up.
Sorry.
Just a question. Because this is town funding and some projects may involve federal funding, should we have like Rhode Island Historical Preservation Heritage Commission listed as a potential approval?
And that, okay,
I
in the
can-
section.
I can
Yeah.
do that. If there are lots of other things that might be required, and maybe I should just use that last box for an other and have them identify that in the narrative. I mean, I think we've identified the most common ones, but you're correct. I mean, if it's a project in the historic district, it would require HDC approval. If it's in if it's in a development with a homeowners association, it could require some sort of sign off from them. So if we just click other and have them add that to the project narrative, I think it would be complete.
Thank you.
I think it might be valuable as well, just from my experience being in the non-for-profit space. If we do want to maybe plan the next meeting or some type of like roundtable discussion with for-profit and nonprofit developers, anyone that would be looking to seek this funding for their public input, just to see, for folks who normally are doing applications, if there's information that they have that could be valuable to strengthen it. One of the things that I'm not sure if we're just talking the formatting of this application or the application in general, but I would want to, and I don't know if this would be the responsibility of the housing authority, but figuring out a way, and I think we had touched upon this in the last meeting. We're looking at the structure side of it, but as far as the individual or family that ends up moving into the unit, and that qualifying criteria, how do we enforce that these units that are being developed are going to folks who earn whatever we decide the LMI is for the units, right? So like if there's an income bracket between say 40 and 80% AMI, who is going to be the entity that verifies that information? Is that going to be us, or would that be the housing authority? And do we create those guidelines, or does the housing authority create those guidelines?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about, deed restricted, there's going to be an agent responsible for the housing. So they would be responsible for making sure that all of the necessary guidelines are complied with so far as income goes.
I do have a question about that. Is there oversight of making sure that the monitoring agents are going in on a regular basis? Like,
I
how does
mean,
that
you're
work?
watching the watchers.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like, how do we know, like, are they invited in by the property owner? Does the property owner select the monitoring agent? And so I guess that, yeah, the question is there some risk there
Well,
for there being a
the
vacuum?
monitoring agent is going to be identified, and maybe maybe that's something we should have right on the form, is an identification of the monitoring agent.
Yeah, I'm only asking because it's come up in the community a couple of times for me now, where people are asking like, well, how does the town know for sure that affordable units are really being resided in by folks who meet the criteria? And I didn't have as a robust an answer as I wanted to have.
Yeah, some type of means testing, I think, would be helpful, meaning that, if someone has a pension, say, or an IRA that has income in it, do we, look at someone's assets, or are we just looking at income? And who would be in charge of that?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that, the current tests look at income, not assets, which is one reason why a lot of retired people qualify for these affordable units, even though they may have substantial assets, because they don't have income.
Well, and I think in terms of the monitoring agent piece, it might even be something where we can like either get an answer later or put it on the agenda as a different bullet point at some point in the future. I don't think I don't know if that needs to be tied to this specifically.
I wonder whether it's a little bit early in the process to be asking for that at this point in time. But I tell you what I'll do is I will throw it in there just so we know we're thinking about it. And if we decide to eliminate it, it's a lot easier to cut out. So, I don't know what everybody else thought of Alicia's suggestion of some sort of roundtable with developers who might be participating in this process to maybe identify other things. I'm not sure how we would go about reaching out to those people. I don't know if anybody has any ideas on that. And did we lose Joe? Looks like we did. Maybe he's in my.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that question, Alicia. That was a really good question and definitely something to think about. Is the, yeah,
Yeah, I think,
I was here. I think he just demoted me. That's all, but
Oh, I must have, I meant to somehow got you instead of Mary Ann. I had meant to send her back, so.
yeah, as far as coordinating like a roundtable discussion, I know a place that maybe we could start is looking at developers who've already built in town. Since we do have the list that you created, Brian, of the different developments. I don't know if we have a developer tied to those, but like, I know, for example, I could probably bring in our executive director at South County Habitat because he has more insight on this application process and has filled more of those out than I have. So he might have feedback, but also we can invite other nonprofits who are working on housing, and then for-profit developers who maybe were doing a development following where there was a lot for affordable housing, in their experience, and that we could probably reach out to them and then maybe do some type of like request for public input.
Well, I mean, certainly that's one purpose of these meetings is for, the public to attend. It will be easier or harder depending on how you look at it, effective next week when we're back to in-person meetings. So sometimes those roundtable discussions are more effective in person than in this format. It does require people though to leave their houses and go to town hall.
So, and is the thought on this, once we get it where we want it, we're going to put it back up to town council to rubber stamp this?
They did ask to
For sure.
see. They did ask to see the forms once they were prepared. I was a little unclear as to whether they were asking to see them or to approve them. I'm going to assume the latter because if they ask to see them, they're undoubtedly going to have some comments and maybe some suggestions as well.
That's my only thought, Alicia, in terms of process, is that I think I like the idea of getting some feedback from folks who might be applying for this, just to make sure that it makes sense to them, maybe, and that we can say we've at least checked in with, likely candidates, because that's also like soft marketing that this is something we're working on and they should be thinking about. But if it's going to go back up to town council for a look-see too, I'm not sure we would want to heavily involve the public at large. Folks who are interested probably will pay attention, come to meetings, or see it during the town council agenda when it's posted theirs. And I feel like for this scope of this kind of project, that's probably enough. But that's just one opinion on the committee. So I don't know how other people feel about that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other thoughts on the document itself?
I don't know if we want to put, unless we already did this. I don't know if it's a priority of the town to look at energy efficiency in building, but if that would be, and I apologize if this is on the rubric, but if that's something that we'd find valuable to put on the scoring rubric as far as not necessarily the construction, like not like green building, but if the house is in any type of Energy Star standard.
So are we moving into the rubric at this point?
I feel like that might be moving us into the rubric. Is everybody okay with us moving on to that document?
We can always come back, but I just
Correct.
want to make sure I have the right one up here to comment on.
Same here. That's not the one. Uh-oh, I'm having link issues again. All right, I have a paper copy. So we'll jump over to the rubric is it worth just going through each of the criteria, maybe to see if people have comments on any of the particular criteria? Brian, are you able to screen share that one?
Yeah, I can screen share that. Let's do that.
Awesome, thank you. So the first criteria was total number of LMI units. And then as that goes up from 2 to 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 plus, that's where you would get your increasing number of points.
Yeah, and the point awards, certainly if you think I'm off base with any of these things, let me know. I tried to make the best decisions that I could into where the break points were. But I'm certainly open to suggestions.
And then the next criteria was number of extra LMI units proposed. And then extra meaning units exceeding the legal requirements. So again, sort of going from meeting the requirements, 1 or 2 additional, 3 or 4, 5 plus. And then Brian, the next one is intended to be its own separate category for scoring. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, I think what I'm trying to capture between these two is if you're doing a two unit subdivision and you're making one of them LMI, I mean, you're at 50%. You're only doing 1 unit, so you're getting a low allotment in one, but you're doing 50% of your development, which would give you more in the other.
Yeah.
So I think it helps in terms of smaller subdivisions or smaller developments that offer a larger number of units as LMI to give them some props for doing that, even though total numbers may not be on the same level as a big subdivision.
Allows us to incentivize developers of sort of all sizes, right? Or development of all sizes. Okay. So far, so good, everybody. And then the next one, this is where you had made a change. So now it's number of LMI bedrooms
Oh,
proposed.
it's average number of LMI bedrooms.
Average.
Yeah.
Mine printed out.
And my comment here was I wasn't sure about the value of this criteria because different size units fill different niches in the housing market. So I wasn't sure whether simply having more bedrooms was necessarily better than having fewer bedrooms at potentially a lower price point. So that's why I left that comment in there for anybody else to consider as well.
Any discussion or questions on that?
I have a clarifying question just because I'm not sure. When we say units, are we meaning like, because I'm coming from like a single family house, so I'm assuming like this also applies to like apartment units as well, or rental units or ADUs. So if the first criteria is total number of LMI units, that could be say it's a development of 5 1-bedroom units versus 1 5-bedroom unit. So I guess my question is, would we want to score number of bedrooms. Because then we can figure out, if it's a, say, more than one bedroom dwelling, how many of those are going to be allocated for LMI units versus if it's a single family house that's designed for all affordable. I don't know if that
So-
makes any sense. I'm just trying to understand.
So a unit is a dwelling unit, and maybe I need to clarify that. So dwelling unit meaning, a self-contained home. By definition, a dwelling unit has a place to prepare food, a place for sanitary facilities, and a place to sleep, separate from those other two places. So, when I talk about bedrooms, it's, how many bedrooms within a dwelling unit.
Gotcha. Okay, I think that answered my question. Thank you very much.
And the dwelling unit could be a single family house or an apartment in an apartment complex.
So Brian, I know what you're trying to get at, and I think it's a good placeholder. But in order to use that, we would have to have a good sense of what the demand is. So if we knew that we needed 3 bedrooms and we didn't need that many 1-bedrooms, then this would be a good tool, or vice versa if we knew we needed 1 and not 3. But not knowing the demand for each of them, I'm not sure that we would want to score one higher than the other. So
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I was scratching my head about, Joe.
yeah.
And the demand right now is for everything, right? So I that's a challenge. But yeah, you'd have to wonder whether you make an argument that right now our affordable housing stock is, I think, about 27% family, and then the remainder is senior and group home housing, as I recall. So that would potentially be an argument for having something like this in, if we as a committee wanted to incentivize more maybe family housing that would accommodate more families who had more than
and I
one
go
child.
along, similar would be home ownership versus rental would probably also fit the same category. There's probably a demand for both. If we had some way of measuring the relative demand between those two, and then we could use it in the scoring. But without knowing what the demand is for each. I don't know, maybe, I don't know if there's some way to hold it as a placeholder, but not necessarily use it until such time we have a good idea of demand for each of those categories.
Do you mean as applications come in, Joe? Like, what do you mean by, I just want to make sure I understand what you mean by demand.
Oh, no, I wasn't looking at it from the contractor or the developer's perspective. I was looking at it from the end user perspective. So if we knew in town, forget about the end user, the developer for a minute, but if we knew in town that we had a big demand of people that needed 1-bedrooms, and then we could score that higher. Or if we knew for sure we had a really big demand for rentals over ownership, we could score that higher. But without knowing exactly what those demands are, it's tough to score one above the other.
I'm going to mention something. I do know quite a few families that have come to me and asked me if I knew of landlords that would, these are families that have Section 8 vouchers, and they end up losing the vouchers because there's no 3 bedrooms, there's no 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms. These are families that have 3 or 4, possibly 5 kids that they're looking for housing, and they've been on a waiting list for 8 years or more. So in my personal experience and families that I know, I would say that the demand would be 3+ bedrooms. It's kind of it's a really hard ask, but guess what? It's the reality of housing security. So
Yeah, and Kelly, I don't doubt that, but I think it could be, perspective on what we see. I'm a landlord and I get a real lot of people, especially females, that are in their 50s and 60s that need housing, especially if they had a career, they got divorced, they no longer have the income. And here they are, all of a sudden they're on their own and they're trying to figure out, how do I afford $1,200 or $1,400 for an apartment? So I think there's probably, demand all over. Question is, could we as a town figure out how we want it, which one's, I guess, the biggest demand, and how do we use that to encourage the developers? So
I guess I would just highlight again, like, what does our affordable housing stock look like right now? Who are we already serving? Because on the one hand, in the demographics just statewide, we know there's going to be more households of 1 and 2, like that's what the demographics show. So there's absolutely going to be demand for those 1-bedroom type units. On the other hand, we may already be serving a lot of that need relative to other communities locally, and not serving the need of folks who need, if you just look at the affordable housing we have right now, there really isn't a lot of affordable housing in our town that serves families who need more bedrooms. So yeah, I think the question is, do we want to be explicit about that we want to be incentivizing one over the other? I think there's an argument to be made, since we have so much housing already that accommodates affordable housing already that accommodates folks who need 1 and 2 bedrooms, that it's something we should be thinking about.
To echo Jen's comment, looking at the housing fact book from Housing Works Rhode Island, and just to confirm what she was saying, looks like based off of 2019 data, there's the 5.61% of year-round housing stock that's allocated for affordable housing. 56% of that is for what's identified as the elderly population, 26% family, and 17% special needs, for just a point of reference.
Well, maybe we can all put some thought into how to word this that might be effective. I definitely understand Callie's comment. I mean, anybody that is, looking for this kind of housing who needs a lot of bedrooms is going to be in a difficult position, because that is always going to be tough to find. At least in my experience, seeing these projects come through the planning department. Anytime somebody's creating deed restricted housing, it's usually a 2-bedroom unit, and if you're looking for 3 or 4, it's tough. But I think that we haven't exactly struck on the right way to phrase this question to tease out the information that we need.
Okay, so we'll put our thinking caps on for this particular part of the rubric. All right, consistency with the housing element of the SK comprehensive plan. So no points if it's not consistent, 1 point if it meets the minimum expectations, 2 if it exceeds, and 3 if it's innovative or an exceptional effort to create quality, affordable housing. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I think if for whomever's determining those different levels, it'd be good to have a definition of what we would consider innovative or exceptional. versus, exceeds expectations. So is that outlined in the comprehensive plan, or is that just based on our own judgment?
This is just me.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, I'm trying to do the best that I can, to frame this out, and massaging or polishing. That's why it's here tonight, is to see if anybody has a better idea on framing this. I usually try to start with, what's the low point and what's the high point, and then, try and find some shades of gray in the middle. So with this, the low point is easy. If you're not consistent with the comprehensive plan, you get nothing. And the high point, I think you have to be doing something special. And then we wind up with these two shades of gray, the one where you're doing what you need to do. You're doing a little bit more than you need to do, but it's not particularly special or innovative.
Is this rubric eventually going to be used by us as a committee or the staff to be scoring? I don't know why.
I think you could do it either way. You could have staff do the initial run through, and then you could vet it at the meeting when you vet the application and make any adjustments.
Okay.
Or you can have the staff just do it itself.
All right. Thanks. This helps me when I'm thinking through things like definitions, like what Alicia's asking, like whether we would have opportunity to sort of discuss that potentially if we wanted to.
I think ultimately the decision belongs to the committee, whether or not you ask staff to put together a recommendation on scoring as part of staff review or staff report on the application. That's up to you. What I've done with other boards is, when you get the application in, you circulate the application to all the board members with a blank rubric sheet, and you guys go through it individually before you show up to the meeting, and then talk your way through the form during the course of the meeting and come to agreement.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful. Okay. I'm going to keep us moving along, if that's okay with everybody. So the next section is financial standing of the Affordable Housing Fund relative to the amount sought.
So this is just an effort to try and look at how solvent the fund is at the time the application comes in. So amount requested plus surplus of less than $5,000. So you're by granting the application, you would be leaving the fund at a point where it would have less than $5,000. I look at this as being a way to balance whether or not you give away the money or preserve it in the fund for potentially a different, better project in the future that may require more money, and that you need the fund to continue to accumulate.
We know at this point what is already in that fund, or we've just established it and then we will be putting.
I think the last time we checked, there was about $10,000 in the fund. I I think I need to get a better picture from Zach Saul in the finance department about the rate at which funds, we can expect funds to accumulate here so that we sort of have an idea of what that is. But the last time I talked to him, it was about $10,000.
Thank you.
Okay, and then developers' experience with LMI projects. So again,
I was gonna say, this one I kind of got mixed feelings about. I mean, I understand, future success is probably best measured by past success, but there's also a piece of me that says that we want to get as many involved as possible, and we want to bring in some of the players that maybe otherwise haven't done this in the past, or maybe otherwise wouldn't do this in the past. So, like I said, I kind of got mixed feelings for that reason.
I think that's an interesting point.
Could we reframe it maybe to like, would it be helpful for us to see like how many LMI projects they've done in the town and not just in general? Or do we not want to have that criteria, to Joe's point of allowing new opportunities for people who have not developed LMI units before? But I'm just wondering if we want to look at like how many they've already done in town as a way of measuring experience. I don't know.
I mean, I can chime in. At the university, we regularly screen consultants. We occasionally screen contractors. We never want to be the guinea pig for any major development. I mean, I appreciate what Joe's trying to say, and maybe there's another way we can get there. But if you're going to try to assess somebody based on their experience with the specific type of projects we want, then you want to have this measurement. You don't want to be the guinea pig.
But is there a big difference in developing an LMI unit versus being a developer? So if somebody's developed apartment building before, but didn't have any LMI units in it, is that much different than developing an apartment now where one or two is designated as an LMI unit? The LMI piece seems to be a little bit different than the whole project management and being able to successfully complete a development project.
Then maybe the question should be developers' experience with the type of project in question.
I like that, I guess. I like that a little bit better. Yeah.
Because developing a 50-unit apartment complex is going to be different than building a subdivision of single-family homes.
So I like that because, again, you kind of still can bring in people that maybe haven't participated in LMI, but you're still getting somebody that has a successful track record. And we may be able to get some people that in the past developed a bunch of apartments, but never did the LMI, but now they're going to consider the LMI because of some additional incentives they get here and elsewhere.
and you're screening more for the expertise than the LMI versus not LMI. I like that idea too, Joe.
There's a lot of developments that's being produced now. Does anyone know if any of those are LMI units? I see a lot on, was it 138? I could be wrong. Kingston Road. Tower Landings, I think is one. And
yes, there are LMI units in that that project. There are also LMI units in the project going in near the police station on Curtis Corner Road. There's another project slated to go in on Holly Street behind Job Lot. There are some LMI units proposed in there. If you look at the spreadsheet that I circulated, there's sort of a grayed out part at the bottom.
yeah,
Those are all applications that weren't really at final at the time that the table was prepared. the place on Kingstown Road now, of course, is at final. They're actually in construction. So that needs to be bumped up and taken out of the gray shaded area.
Right, let's see. I'm going to move us on to the next section if that's all right then, everybody. So now we're into the three pieces related to walkability. So walkability relative to public transit, employment and essential goods and services, and walkability relative to recreation. So the further away it is, the lower the points are that are awarded. So if it's more than 3/4 of a mile, then there's no points. And then you can see as it's going, if it's on the other end of the spectrum, equal or less than 1/4 of a mile away, then that would be awarded the full 3 points.
I would just offer, Jen, changing walkability to accessibility. I'm sure a lot of us have seen folks in wheelchairs or motorized units that are forced into the roadway because they may be within a half mile or 1/4 mile of an area, but they're literally in the middle of the road. So accessibility versus walkability is something I'd like you to consider.
I would suggest that the issue of accessibility might be a different line in the rubric altogether. I mean, walkability is something that's usually judged in terms of time and distance. Accessibility, when you're talking more in the lines of ADA type criteria is a bit different. I think we could simply add that as another line item.
Okay.
I'm not sure how I would award points on that though. So if anybody has ADA experience.
Well, let me give you an example. And I'm fine with that suggestion, Brian. We had a housing development we looked at a few years back on Old North Road, and it may be on paper close to the Emporium, laundry facilities, groceries, food, whatever, RIPTA, but there are no sidewalks. So I'm saying accessibility, I guess, little a instead of big A, not necessarily pulling in all of the ADA Act, but there are certain parts of town that might be right for development that have no sidewalk facilities, regardless of your capabilities. So somehow we should just think about how we might, I wouldn't want a developer to say, draw a line and, oh yeah, you're 1/4 mile from here to there, so I get the max points. But there may be no sidewalks and maybe a high-speed roadway, and we've seen these applications. Out on Route 2, we've seen people out there. You might be close to RIPTA, but there's nothing else out there, and you're really kind of taking your life in your hand if you're walking out on Route 2. Just something to think about.
So, is that maybe a consideration in how we define walkability? And maybe there's an asterisk that goes there that says that walkability is defined by safe pedestrian travel, not involving being in a road right away, or
Yeah, I think to your point, it goes less or it trends away from a quantitative analysis to a qualitative analysis. It's really saying you could be 1/4 of a mile away, but is it a high-speed roadway? Are you in the middle of town where there are wide sidewalks that are very easy to get, back and forth? And you could factor in the, ADA accessibility component as well. It might be a little bit trickier for the developer to kind of understand these issues. So if you have a little asterisk and maybe an explanation of what we're trying to get at, the developer should be able to, fill out the application and understand what we're trying to do. And again, I'll mention that specific development off of Old North Road. That went through the full SHAB appeal process. We as a group said, you know what, this is great, but you need sidewalks. And the developer bucked it and said, no way, we're not going to do it. And, we ultimately lost. So.
Well, you lost the sidewalks, but you didn't lose the case at Chat.
Right. So in my
Yeah.
mind, the town now has an obligation to build sidewalks and in my other capacity at the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, we're trying to screen all these areas to figure out how do we connect people so that, we do account for all types of demographics. Not everybody has a car. So we've got to figure out how to get people from point A to point B.
Yep, great point. And also bus line is important too, especially when you're walking with children. Some people have appointments and.
I worry I'm the negative Nelly on the other end of this, that's getting pretty complex for scoring ability in a rubric. And I hear what you're saying, and I agree there's accessibility issues that are well beyond the distance. I feel like this section is really much more talking about the distance relative to these things. On North Road, I also wonder, like, how far is that actually from the bus stop? It probably wouldn't have gotten the quarter mile from where the bus stop is, that particular development. But it would be a really hard place to get around as a pedestrian if you had any mobility issues at all. So I totally hear what you're saying there, Kenny, but it seems like that's going to make this fairly complex. I don't know. I mean, it becomes a little bit more like, I don't know, that's for an Olympics analogy, less like track and more like figure skating. So I'm not sure. I feel I have some hesitation there.
Oh, sorry.
I'd just like to mention it's 7:50 and Ken does have a hard out at 8:00. So just to put everybody on notice that we
Thank you,
lose our
Brian.
quorum in 10 minutes.
Okay, let's maybe quickly go through the last two of these and then see what we can do with the rest of our agenda. So the next one is the town need for the proposed type of LMI, rental ownership and or family elderly special needs. This I feel like goes a little bit back to Joe's inquiry about, have we identified what we feel is like the priority need?
I actually like the way Brian has this worded, and I'm wondering if some version of it could actually be used for the number of bedrooms up above, so anyways.
I can look at that, Joe.
So if we knew for sure that we didn't need any 2 bedrooms because we're getting them for inclusionary zoning, that would score a little lower. And if we knew for sure that, we had a high demand for 1 bedrooms, and for some reason we had something that said we absolutely, the most critical thing right now is 3 bedrooms, and then we could use that.
I think I can come up with something for that, Joe.
Yeah, okay. Just a thought, but good, thank you.
Okay. And then last but not least, percentage of area median income used to set the sale or rental cost. So this is, we've talked about this before, so.
This is good. However, I'm not sure it's applicable to the rental cost as much, because I believe rental cost has to be 80% or less anyways. So the sale price could be up to 120%, but I think the rental would have to be below 80.
I'll look into that, Joe.
It might be helpful when we do figure out a way to prioritize what kind of housing we're going to prioritize, looking at that AMI number as well, because you could have something if you're defining affordable as AMI, you could be, well, what I mean, I guess, is like if you were to set the sale price of, say, a home ownership unit, for example, and it was $230,000, and that was considered affordable. But if the need is for housing that's priced at $180,000, even though technically on paper that price is affordable, is it affordable for income earners in our area? So when we look at needs for housing, you know, are we talking about the AMI being, you know, a certain percentage, or are we looking at cost burden? And, you know, like a unit can be affordable, but someone can still be cost burden in an affordable unit. So for like with housing, for home ownership, for example, at Habitat, we priced it so that it's no more than, it's still within an 80% to 40% income range, but the purchase price of the house is no more than 30% of the home buyer's income. So even if we could sell that house for more and still be affordable, we actually sell it so that it's 30% or 28% of their income. So I don't know if we want to differentiate between the two, but the sale versus the income range. And if we do, I don't know how we'd want to capture that here, but that's just one of the thoughts I had, is as we're kind of trying to define that affordable criteria, what do we mean when we say affordable?
I think we might want to think about maybe that being your 3-point category, where the price or the rental rate is actually being keyed to that that affordability issue, that, you know, 30% of income, rather than a metric like AMI. I don't know. I don't know how you would
It gets
capture that. That's such a tight level of customization. I don't know how you would capture that on something like this.
Right.
I can't see everybody's face right now because I had to pull up the agenda, but I'm going to suggest that maybe we're going to have to table B and C, you know, because we're wrapping up in 5 minutes or so, and maybe just touch quickly on new business. Is that okay with everybody?
That's good. I think, Brian, you just have to look at that last one on ownership versus the rental, and may have to break it into two separate, since the ownership rental can't be higher than 80% anyways. So if it's a rental and it's 80%, they're actually meeting the minimum requirements. You wouldn't necessarily want to give them 5 points. So
Okay.
All right. In that case, we will move on. Elections, I think we already very briefly touched on, because Josh has moved on. We should have elections for our chair, vice chair, and secretary at the next meeting. Do we need to vote on that to put it on the agenda?
No, you can just tell me to put it on the agenda. It's I put that here mainly to get people thinking about it ahead of next meeting, rather than just being hit in the face with it 3 days before the meeting comes up. So, everybody should start thinking about it. We do have a new member who was appointed by the town council. Her name's Elizabeth Karp. But she was appointed to a term that didn't start until August 1st, so she was not eligible to be seated for this meeting. But she, assuming between now and then she goes and gets sworn in, she should be with us for the August meeting.
Great, and then it looks like, oh, sorry, did someone?
Sorry, Jen, for B and C, for item B and C, can we add that to next agenda?
We'll certainly carry that over.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. It will carry forward.
Okay.
And then return to in-person meetings. I got an email from the Secretary of State today saying Friday was the last day we could hide in Zoom. So did you have other things to say about that, Brian?
Yeah, I just note that we do have a council meeting and a planning board meeting next week that will be hybrid meetings due to advertising that went out before we knew we were going to be back to full in-person stuff. So we sort of painted ourselves into a corner where we didn't have any choice but to offer both Zoom and in-person at the same time. At present, it is the town manager's perspective that we will not be offering hybrid meetings on a long-term basis going forward due to technical and staffing difficulties inherent with doing that. The risk of somebody trying to attend and participate via Zoom and having technical difficulties and having that person kicked out and having the meeting proceed could lead to legal problems for the meeting that we just don't really want to risk. So the intent is that after the couple of meetings we have next week, we will be back to pre-COVID in-person meetings with some sort of streaming for the public to observe but not participate. That, of course, is all up in the air because as if we haven't learned anything during the last year is that things can change from day to day to week. And it could all change. We could all be back to Zoom in a month. Who knows? This is going to be an issue for a substantial discussion at the town council meeting on Monday. And the town council could decide to go in a different direction. So we'll know more on the 26th.
And for those of you who've only been with us during Zoom era, we meet in the same room as the town council there's a table there. So we'll be on the second floor.
Unless there's a conflict, in which case
Right.
we meet in the conference room off to the side. So
The adjacent little room, yeah.
yeah, I have this issue right now with our next EDC meeting, which is also on a Thursday night, but the town council has decided to have a special meeting, which means everybody else gets punted out of council chambers and into the adjacent conference room.
Okay, anything else from the planning department before we let Kenny go?
I know Kenny has to get out of here, so.
Okay, so we can wait till next month. Nothing pressing.
Okay. And as normal, if anybody has things that they want added to the agenda, simply email myself and Christian, who is the acting chair. And it's almost every time it'll get put on the agenda, but we do have to manage the agenda and the length of the meetings. So we do need to vet things as they come in.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest that we get a motion to adjourn the meeting. I'm listening. Everyone?
A motion?
Alicia
So,
made a
yeah,
motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, I make motion.
Kenny seconded it.
it because he's got to go. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay.